One thing I say that people get offended by is that writers all steal from each other. Well, maybe we should say we learn from each other. So when you watch others speak and tell stories, pay attention to what they're doing. Think about all the techniques that we've talked about. How can I learn from someone else? And so, what people say, some of the great speeches that are elegant and simple but very powerful. What made great speakers great, and how do we learn from them? I love this line. Maybe stories are just data with a soul. And what is the soul? Well, the thing is, in religion and sci-fi, nobody actually tells you what the soul is. And to me, what your soul is your ability to connect to others. The people who have no connection to others, these are the people who basically have holes in their soul. And so if you're not connected to others, you can murder, you can steal, you could do things without conscience. We have a conscience because we feel connected to others. And so stories, what is it? You're giving out information and you're connecting with others. Winston Churchill. When my granddaughter was born, she looked like Winston Churchill. But anyway, he talked about, the great speakers, and he believed that people who can speak well can impassion people. Of course, he's a politician. But this is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And first of all, everybody remembers the beginning, 7 years ago. Why didn't he just say 87 years ago? No, he put it this way because it's memorable, because it draws us in. Think about your first line. And after this long sentence, how does he end it? All men are created equal. And so that gets people's attention. And then he talks about why they're there. Can long endure, dedicate a portion of that field. And so you have to tell, what is the purpose of what it is that you're doing? One thing Lincoln understood was how to use rhetoric. And one of the most common techniques of rhetoric is repetition. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, and we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead. Why didn't he say, the living and dead brave, or something like that? Every word has a meaning. Lincoln understood that. And what does he do? He closes it using rhetoric. Of the people, by the people, for the people. And shall not perish from the earth. Even though you've never heard Lincoln speak the words speak for themselves. Now, this is Jobs' commencement speech that you can read through and watch the video. Jobs, more than any other CEO, every year his plenary talk for Apple was must-watch business. I mean, everybody watched Jobs because Jobs was very engaging, and Jobs was basically a storyteller. And Jobs understood what it is that makes a story. And how does he end his talk? Stay hungry, stay foolish. So when you make a diagram of Jobs' talk, he just has a very few simple points. And it took him 15 minutes to get there. But remember what I said about time. When you tell a good story, it doesn't feel like 15 minutes. His opening. Yeah, it wasn't a first line, but the first couple of lines. And the first thing he points out is, I'm not a college graduate. And here he is talking to Stanford. I mean, these are kids who, when they were in grade school, knew that they were, going to go to a great college and get a degree and stuff like that. And his first point he segued into is, but, how did he get to that college? And it had to do about family. And he talked about how he was unwanted and how he realized that the best education he'll ever get in his life is experience. Then he moves on to his second point, and that's love and loss, which is Apple. And the third, he talks about death. and the impact death had on him because he had cancer. Now, his story has inaccuracies. He said, well, I got this surgery right away. No, he didn't. Actually, Jobs would have had an excellent chance of living if he had just gotten the surgery. But even he admitted he was afraid of being cut open. So he went on, juicing and seeds and stuff like that. And then when all that failed, then he had surgery, and then he invested hundreds of $millions into genomic research to try to find a cure for him. Closing, he summarizes his life, and that's the lesson for everyone else, that there's a payoff at the end. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And despite a lot of despair, in a very unique way, he basically told his hero's story. Who are the great speech makers? One is considered Kennedy. He convinced the United States, the country, to go to the moon. He did it through tone. He did it through repetition. Outstanding writer. The other thing about Kennedy is, contrary to the politicians of today, he wasn't talking about what I'm going to do for you. He was talking about what you're going to do for everybody else. He put it on you. Martin Luther King, his I Have a Dream speech, why was that so powerful? Because it was clarity, theme, and also he would repeat things. Now, he wouldn't word it the same way, but the themes he kept bringing up on and again, and that's like, can we get past these prejudices? Winston Churchill, if you listen to his speech, and so here's the link on YouTube, he is outstanding, and that's it. If you watch him, he really modulates his voice. He speeds up, he slows down, he knows exactly when to break. Like, for example, we all fight on the land, we all fight in the seas, we all fight in the air. And then he pauses, and then he says, we will never surrender. And that's what made it so powerful. If he didn't pause and just ran straight into it, he would have lost the entire power of it. Think about where you want to make your emphasis. Nelson Mandela, he also very good at using modulations and pauses. But the big thing about Mandela is he came in with an incredible amount of credibility because he went to prison for 40 years, all for this belief. And the other thing that was amazing to me about Mandela is a man who was in prison for 40 years, he didn't have 1 ounce of bitterness. He just had hope for the future, and it came out in how he talked. Okay, when we talk about the great speakers, yes, Adolf Hitler. And the thing about Hitler is, if you watch, you don't know what on earth he's saying, unless you know German. But you can't take away from the fact that he was a very dynamic speaker, and that's what he loved. He loved getting in front of people. He gave 5,000 speeches during his 12-year political career. The thing is, his body language, his modulation. And how did he draw people in? Because he made his talks about us against them. And so all of you are us. And he portrayed them as being evil. And then he presented it as, I'm the savior. I'm the only one who knows how to fix this situation. And so those are his virtues and also the evil. Gandhi, as you can pretty much imagine, composed, calm. But what he always did is he talked about how the audience had the power. And people liked that because at that time India wanted to be empowered. Repetition doesn't mean to keep parroting the same words over and over again, but it means that you reinforce it. You can come back to certain themes. Great speakers who aren't politicians. Okay, Oprah, say what you want, make fun of her all you want, but one thing about Oprah is, what is her deal? Her whole deal is empowering others to be able to do great things, that she believes in you, and she's thankful for you. And your truth is the most powerful tool in the world. Who isn't going to buy into that? That's why so many people like Oprah. Warren Buffett, America's greatest investor. He's always been very folksy, very straightforward, very confident in what he had to say. And that's why everybody listened to Warren Buffett. Richard Branson might be my favorite entrepreneur of all time. The man is just bat's nutso. But what he believes in is the 10-star experience. Now, you've heard about the 5-star experience. Branson always tried to get the 10-star experience. And he always had a way of, when he talked about something, of putting himself into the message, but not in an obtrusive way. And that's why when you think of Virgin and everything else, you think of Richard Branson. He's the face of the company and the brand. Who are some bad speakers? Go look at some clips of George W. Bush. Oh my God. Now, people say I pause. This guy pauses for like 5 seconds. His pacing's terrible. You don't know what he's trying to emphasize, and he's giving you a canned speech. He's totally inauthentic. Now, from what I've heard about him in private, when he's not giving speeches, not being a politician, I mean, allegedly, when he was in college and stuff like that, he was like a cocaine fiend, and he drank too much. He was a super partier, and then he found Christianity, and it cleaned himself up. But George W. Bush, when he's sitting around and just talking with people, he could actually be very, very funny and stuff like that. And that's why people like Barack Obama and stuff like that, 2 totally different guys, are actually good friends. Because, yeah, they may not agree on things, but keep something in mind about relationships. You have a lot more things to talk about than just politics. And I think the funniest thing Bush said is when Donald Trump came around, he said, "Well, I don't look so bad now, do I?" George H.W. Bush was my commencement speaker for my PhD. God, was he boring. Oh my God, all he did is talk about his accomplishments and stuff like that because it was coming up on an election year. He does not know how to connect with an audience. He's totally inauthentic, and both guys had the same problem. And then there's Trump. Okay, now I know some of you are Trump supporters. I'm not criticizing it. But let's be objective. In the same way that you have to be truthful and honest with yourself, let's be honest about Trump as a communicator. And I bring him up just because he's all over the place, so at least you know what I'm talking about. But what does Trump do? Why does he have so much power? Well, first of all, he's authentic. Okay, let's give him that. Donald Trump is always himself, for good or bad. The thing is, what is his spiel? That there's all this negative stuff going on in the world, and I'm your savior. And in terms of the mistakes he makes technically, going off and a number of other things and getting lost at times, you can figure that stuff out. We've gone over that stuff enough. So there are great speakers. If you want to learn how to become a great speaker, watch TED Talks. You can see what different people and how they do it. And what is it that they do so well? Now, when people give talks, you can come in with power already, and it actually makes a difference. When Elon Musk, who I consider to be a terrible speaker, gets up and talks, people listen to him because he's Elon Musk. Plus, he brings everything that's going on with him. He brings power to the stage. If he was just like a college professor from a community college, you wouldn't pay him any mind. But the kind of power that you have is referent power, and that means the way people know you, the way they respect you. That is the greatest power of all, and that's what I always tried for wherever I worked. Coercive power means somehow I can hurt you. A legitimate power means you have a title, like you're president or you're vice president or something like that. Expert power, people recognize you know a lot about this. And reward power is like he controls my raises and things like that, or my ability to be promoted. And so those are the kinds of power a speaker can bring. And if you don't have any of those kinds of power, then guess what? Your work increased quite a bit. We all steal from each other. I met an ASU professor at a get-together, and he asked me how you're doing. I said, I'm having an average year. He said, well, what's an average year? And I said, I'm having an average year. Better than last year, but not as good as next year. And then he paused and he said, ooh, that's good. I'm going to steal that one. By all means, go right ahead. A lot of people have quoted me. I've stolen from other people. For example, I told you my line. I was born of poor but noble parents. Actually, I think it was Aeschylus or somebody like that who first said it. But the person who reused it, which got my attention, was actually a guy I went to MIT with, Peter Schunemann, who wrote one of actually the best essays I ever read or heard for getting into college. What if that person's in the room and I'm stealing from them? By all means, say, if I said, I was born of poor but noble parents. And if Pete was sitting in the room, I'd say, thanks, Pete. He helped me with that one. Or I got the line from him, or something like that. Show humility. It's not a bad thing. What it comes down to is being able to map out your talk, thinking about your content, your paces and gestures. How am I going to connect with the audience? We've now gone over all these things. These are part of your toolbox. This is why writers read. Learn from others. Here's the thing about storytelling, and I realize was a big issue. A lot of your professors do repetition. Here's my problem with doing repetition or the deep dive. Then you don't cover anything else, and odds are most of the people in the room aren't going to use it again. This is why I say we professors, we are nothing but tour guides. That's all we are. I give you all the credit in the world. And why do I give you the credit? Because unless you work at it, unless you study it, unless you do your homework, nothing I can tell you is going to help you to become a storyteller. You have to work at it on your own. So I'll leave you this. For those of you who've taken different classes in TEM, you know Professor Griffin and you know Professor Chavez. Both of them, great speakers. Analyze what is the difference between them and what makes them good or what could make them better. I think Professor Chavez and Professor Bronowitz are going to start a club, the TEM Hair Club for Men. Anyway, Chavez is a really good sport. I make fun of him losing his hair all the time, and he just kind of laughs at it. You can practice your storytelling every day. It's up to you how good you want to be.